Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-chair of Denver Startup Week. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. DSW has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible, our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, our designer track sponsor, Battery 621, and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to the week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage, Path, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors, all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use the hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experiences and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Hello, I'm Sal Gentili, CEO of Friday Health Plans, and we're proud to sponsor the growth track this year at Denver Startup Week. We're a company that just entered a rapid growth phase, so we felt it was particularly appropriate. When my business partner and I started Friday Health Plans 5 years ago, we knew we wanted to create a company that catered to people who bought their own health insurance. The Affordable Care Act was just getting going, and we saw an opportunity to serve a brand new market of health insurance consumers. Independent consultants, startup groups, gig workers, service industry workers, designers, creators, and other independent professionals, like many of you here today. We knew that if we built a health plan that was simple to buy, easy to use, had great customer service, and most of all was affordable, we could compete against the big insurance plans who only focus on serving big companies. After spending 5 years getting into the Colorado market and completing a successful proof of concept, we successfully closed a $50 million round of growth funding earlier this year. We're now about to expand to 3 additional states later this year, hire more than 400 employees to support our growth, and eventually be in more than 10 states by 2025. I wish each of you good luck in your startup and growth pursuits. And as you think about your upcoming health insurance needs, I hope you consider fellow growing startup Friday Health Plans. Open enrollment starts November 1st. Check us out at fridayhealthplans.com.
Hello everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Jake Cohen, the Growth Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow. Regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation. A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep Denver Startup Week free and accessible for all. Thank you for joining us and have a great week.
Thanks, Samantha. I really appreciate that opener. And my name is Carm Huntress, and we're going to get started with our session. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up a deck to guide our talk today. So what we really wanted to have a discussion about today is sort of staying true to your values through massive growth. There's a lot of unique challenges when you start a company and then it goes through massive growth, especially from the small phases to relatively larger phases. And culture and values is kind of one of the most important things to keep everybody aligned, because sadly, you really don't have a lot of time to sort of stop and take a breath and really evaluate these things as you tend to grow. A little bit background on me. I did my background in engineering, electrical engineering at Northeastern University in Boston, and then really started one of my first companies. I was actually still in high school when I started, but web hosting was a big thing back in the late 90s, and I built a web hosting company and sold that in 2001. And then kind of went and grew up through product and eventually became a CTO at two companies, one called Reef Partners and then AudioGone, and then moved here to Denver in 2013 and really wanted to do something very mission driven. So I just started to get into digital healthcare and healthcare IT. Little did I know how challenging it was going to be, and little did I know how much massive growth we were going to face from founding the company in 2013 to today. So just a little bit about RxRevu and what we do. We focus on bringing real-time drug costs and other types of real-time content around cost transparency to the point of care. We do real-time transactions with most of the national insurance companies and work with most of the major health systems in the United States. I founded the company with a guy named Dr. Kevin O'Brien, who really wanted to help his mother, whose name was Lucy, save money on her prescription drugs. And that actually became a mantra in the company, which we'll talk about in a minute. And as of 2021, we've now secured a spot on the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies in the United States. And I think in healthcare IT, we were number 45. So really impressive growth for what we've done over the last 8 years. What's really unique about us is our investors are mainly major health systems. And so we really are not sort of beholden to large corporations who maybe have poor incentives. We're really aligned with doctors trying to do their best for patients. And we believe a lot of that has actually helped us grow and helped us really stay differentiated in the market. So just to give everybody a sense of kind of what kind of growth we've gone through, and this really doesn't even go back to 2018 when we were minuscule. We were working with a few thousand doctors in 2018. We now work with close to actually 200,000 doctors in our network, and we do over 4 million transactions a month, and so our revenue's grown about 1,300% in that time frame. So we faced all the typical challenges that you would see in an early stage startup with 10 or 20 people scaling very, very quickly. Everything kind of broke and things aren't working, and you have to work nights and weekends to get everything up and running for your clients, no matter what. And in our world, we're trying to price drugs in real time as part of a clinical workflow. So we can rarely, if ever, be down for our clients, and we think that's critically important. When it comes to our values, this is stuff that we've worked on over the years and continued to refine. I would say probably the most important one are the first two here, if we're going to talk about any. The Lucy Up really came out of this interesting cultural discussion we have and saying, we've got to do what's right for patients, and really got to a point with the team where someone said, hey, we should have this phrase pony up. And then someone said, oh, well, how about Lucy Up for Dr. Kevin O'Brien's mother, who was really the first person or first patient that we optimized drugs for and sort of saved a bunch of money. In his mother's case, in Lucy's case, Dr. O'Brien ended up saving her about $400 a month. And that was pretty important to her because she was on a fixed income. So this Lucy Up mantra is probably our most used one in the company, and is very memorable in terms of how we do our best to help patients save money, and really points to what the company does. The second one is obvious as well, but really prioritize the patient. I think the hard thing about digital healthcare and healthcare IT is that there's a big misalignment a lot of the time with who's your customer. Is it as a payer? Is it a health system? Is it pharma? We always come back to what are we doing really the best thing for the patient? And sometimes we actually sacrifice revenue to do that. And we've done that a number of times in the company's history. And I'm really proud that we've made those tough decisions when we've had to. The other ones I won't go into too much, but they're really about helping the team align around what's important and think about when they're making a decision, are they aligned around these things that we really consider very important to us? I thought, we'd start off a little bit and talk about what are cultural values. I think a lot of times these get confused with like mission or vision statements. And I love this quote by Ben Horowitz, and I'll read it just so everybody can get it. There's a saying in the military that if you see something that is below standard and do nothing, then you set a new standard. This is also true of culture. If you see something off culture and ignore it, you've created a new culture. And I think this both points to the importance of culture and having a set of rules and beliefs and behaviors and actions you want your employees to take in order to be successful at the work they do. But it also really speaks to this, the second part here, which is you're going to have a culture no matter what. If you don't live up to your cultural values, other things will become the norm. Your employees really don't know how to behave and act. And you really have to think about, which I think is a really interesting way to look at it, is how are your employees going to behave when you're not there, right? What are they going to do? And how are they going to act when you're not there? And that's incredibly important if you want to have a successful culture. And especially in a fast growing company, you can't be there all the time. You're hiring people right away. They've got to jump into new work and challenging work, and they have to make the best decisions. And you got to really think about what are the values, what are the behaviors, what are the actions I want my employees to take when I'm not there. And that is so important. I just love this concept of you're going to have a culture no matter what you do. And so you better be deliberate and really focused on getting to the right cultural values. I think the other thing that's really important about cultural values that a lot of companies miss is they need to be memorable and action oriented. So Lucy Up is a great one where it's short, it's memorable. We even have it on swag. We talk about it. We have awards around it. But it's very memorable and you don't forget it. And I think the best cultural values really live up to that. And one of the things that I think is interesting, and we went through this because we had iterations of our cultural values. At one point, we sort of backed up and we said, what's really the right thing? Or what are the things employees think are our values? Because they're here, right? And so we did a lot of surveying and work to ask employees that were working with us, what do you think our values are? And that helped cull out some of these concepts that we now have that we were living into, but not really saying and putting words around them in terms of cultural values. So that's one way to really look at, what may be happening in the team, and also cull out potentially bad habits or actions or beliefs that team members have to course correct. When you think about scaling and you think about all the challenges that you're up against that we went through in terms of scaling very, very fast, and you're hiring, anywhere from a few to, potentially dozens of employees in a single month, you really need a framework for everybody to come in and behave in the right ways together. And you don't really have the time. You'll have some time in onboarding to really talk about this stuff, but if you ignore culture, then people really just don't know how to behave, and they don't, you can't really take the time to sort of stop. You need everybody to get aligned quickly, and when people are aligned, they can move faster. And I'd also say that you're going to also get into a situation very quickly where, as a leader or the founding team, you have to give up decision-making authority very quickly, and your goal, right, is to drive autonomy and authority down into the organization and really help people make the best decisions. And culture can really do that, right? If you're always prioritizing the patient, right, if I have to make a decision, am I doing that in the right way? Is that behavior the right thing? And am I going to get rewarded if I do it in the right way? You know, I think the other thing that a lot of people miss about cultural values is in feedback. The other challenge in scaling really fast is that you end up in this really interesting situation where you don't even really have time to sort of give feedback as people maybe go from an individual contributor to a manager because the job just keeps changing and changing. And I think sometimes a lot of those employees that maybe are now doing one-on-ones and went from being an individual contributor and now they're a manager and they're sitting there having to give feedback or do one-on-one with team members. Cultural values are a little bit of a toolbox to give feedback. And so it gives a center point, not sort of coming at you critically, and this is my opinion, or I'm picking on you or whatever. Well, let's have a conversation as you and as an employee of how you're living up to our cultural values. It's more of a collaborative discussion opposed to something that might have come across as an attack. And so cultural values can be incredibly helpful when you think about giving feedback and supporting those tougher conversations when employees need to scale really fast, you need to get them to the next level, and how they're living up to the values that you've set. And so, this is really, in my mind, why these things matter so much. Otherwise, we tend to sort of just skip over. We tend to put words on walls and call it a day or whatever. You need to do a lot more than that. So let's talk a little bit about the core pieces here of how you really stay true to your values. The first thing I always think about is how are you getting the right people on the bus? That's a Jim Collins thing. It really comes down to making sure that culture is part of your interview process. How much easier is it to find someone that shares the same beliefs and values as you and hire them, opposed to hiring someone who doesn't and then trying to getting them to fit into your culture? It's really important. We look for this. We do both a talent interview and a culture interview. And I believe firmly if someone fails the cultural interview, you really shouldn't hire them, because it's very hard to change someone's personality and their behaviors and their beliefs. It's easy to train them and get them to the next level from a talent perspective. But if someone's misaligned, you want to catch that early. And so make sure it's part of your interview process. The other thing that can be hard, and sometimes it feels cheesy, but you sometimes just have to live into it, is integrated into the conversations. I love how you Lucy'd up today. We have Lucy Up awards on a monthly basis at RxReview. Believe it or not, we even have a belt that employees can win and have the Lucy Up award. And then we actually give a gift card or something like that alongside it. Incorporate it into your one-on-ones, incorporate it into your all hands meetings, make it part of how you live and breathe every day. Make sure you take employees aside and say, look, I know you gave up on that deal with a customer, but it wasn't prioritizing the patient. And I'm so proud that you made that tough decision. It was bad for patients, so we're not going to do it. Those types of conversations are so meaningful and continue to get people more and more aligned around your values. And the other part is, I think a lot of companies could and should have a very robust onboarding process. It's something we pride ourselves with at RxReview. We have a very thorough process in terms of onboarding employees, and getting those values and culture instilled in people as you're onboarding them is incredibly effective in knowing, oh, here's how I need to behave. Here's the things that the company will reward me if I do these behaviors, if I have these actions. I get it. I know how to operate in this environment, opposed to if you don't say anything, then people are just free to do whatever they want. I think the idea of putting, cultural values like Lucy Up or other things is okay to put up on walls. It's okay to put on swag, but it can't be the only thing. I hate when I walk into an organization and it's just a bunch of fluff and it's everywhere, but nobody's living up to the values. It's got to be an and, not an or. It can be helpful to remind people, but just make sure it's not the only thing that you're doing. And then I'm just going to end with, before maybe we jump into some questions, is just remember that your culture does change when you're scaling really fast. The company I think about when we were 10 or 20 people is completely different than the company we are today. We have a much bigger management team. We have middle managers, we have directors. We have a very large engineering team. So it's just a really different place when you start to scale and get closer and closer to 50 or 100 people or even more than that. And it will continue to change and evolve. And I think you've got to make active efforts to sort of check in with people, see if they're really aligned, or has something changed, or maybe you pivoted your business, which happens a lot in early stage startups, or maybe you've grown out of it, a certain cultural value. A good example in our world is we don't not only do drug pricing for prescription drugs today, we now do it for medical stuff. So labs, imaging, radiology, we don't live in just prescription drugs anymore. So, those are things that might lead you to have a cultural value that you would end up changing. So in any case, these are just some of the things that I've really found that help stay true to your cultural values. And that's it for today. So I thank everybody for being part of the conversation. I'm going to stop sharing and see if we've got some questions here, if at all, today. So someone's got a question here about how do you leverage your values in conversations with prospective clients or on sales process? Are they externally facing? This is a really powerful thing for us. I think one of the things that we've gotten back from our clients, and even in our sales deck, we actually start with some mission and values messaging. And I think it can be incredibly powerful because a lot of people want to be part of a mission. They want to be part of making healthcare better. And we found in our world, a lot of the partners and connections we made are those innovators, are those people in very large healthcare organizations that maybe are struggling to do innovation or struggling to be different or really want to make that difference. It can be incredibly powerful to put it into even your sales deck. Don't be afraid when you're in those early sales day or even at scale to walk in and have a first slide and talk about your mission and what's really important and what are your values. People don't just buy products because they're good. They buy because they want to be part of something. And I think that's a really incredible point of leverage that really startups have that really large companies typically don't. Be part of this mission, be part of this journey. And I even have clients today that come to me and say, man, it's been so fun to watch you and be part of this. And, our success is your success. And that can mean a lot. So absolutely live into those things, make them part of your sales deck, put them on your website, make it part of your materials, send Christmas gifts with your cultural values on it. There's nothing wrong with that to both help, in your sales and prospecting. All right, let's see here. Any other questions? Just looking here. Okay, so the first one here is, what does it mean to Lucy up? And I'll just go through that again. So Lucy, Dr. Kevin O'Brien's mother, was on a whole bunch of medications, and what he did for her many years ago now was he sat down and he optimized her medications to be most cost effective and convenient for her. It ended up saving her about $400 a month. And, that was something that we realized could be turned into cultural value in that we could say, look, let's Lucy up. Let's live up to what Kevin did for his mother and helped her save money on her medication. So pretty meaningful in terms of a cultural value. Now, the second question here in, the virtual value problem, right? When we're in office together and we can have water-cooled conversations, we can really, it is somewhat easier to live up to cultural values. Again, I think the thing here is to think about what rituals and what events or things can you do to reinstill your values. And so, one of the things that we do, for instance, is like on weekly all hands, we sometimes have a survey that we'll just give employees so everybody can answer. And sometimes those are about cultural value things. Do you remember what they are? How many people can, out of these 4 choices, which one of these is one of our cultural values? You just have to think about doing these things virtually. When we do our awards, we do those in all hands. We have the Lucy Up Award. We give that out virtually in our weekly or monthly all hands meetings. And so you just have to start to think about what are the rituals and activities we can do that align with our cultural values that we can start to highlight in a non-person to person environment. Think about things you can do on Slack, not only having a wins channel, but maybe a culture channel, or for a while we had a 15-5 channel, which is a feedback system, and people could highlight not only great work people were doing in the company, but how they were living up to the values. So look for ways you can just virtualize, create routines, create rituals that align to those cultural values. And I think, that can be really helpful. And I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions here. Any specific tips that you would work well to integrate the cultural piece of the interview? Okay, yeah, this is a great question. So when you're doing an interview, how do you integrate cultural interview questions? And so let's just take one of ours as an example. So think about relentless improvement. The questions you can ask is, tell me some past job experience when you didn't know anything and had to learn something, and how you quickly, improved and learned that skill, right? Are they demonstrating that behaviors in past jobs or experiences they've had? That's really the best way in the cultural interview to figure out if they demonstrate or have that. So don't just ask the question, are you relentlessly improving in your life? Think about, wait, what does that look like? Wait, what's that action or behavior? And how can we ask a question around that? So we have, sets of questions around each cultural value that really dig into their past experience or their personal life or professional life in terms of how they're, acting in their life before they came in for your interview. And you can really sit there and try to align those questions with those cultural values. So it takes a bit of work, spend time iterating on it, going over it, but I really can't emphasize enough how important those cultural questions are, almost more so important than talent. Because as I said, talent can always be trained. You can always up someone's skill. Very hard to change someone's personality or behaviors. So just remember that as you think about how to integrate this stuff into interviewing or onboarding. And I think that's it. We've only got 2 minutes left. I don't see any other questions on here, and I think we're gonna just call it. But again, my name's Carm Huntress, the founder and chief innovation officer at RxRevu. We are hiring a lot of people, so if you're interested in come joining our culture and what we're doing in terms of trying to fix healthcare and make it much more cost effective and transparent for patients and providers, please go on our website, which is rxreview.com, rxrevu.com. Thanks so much, and so appreciate the time today.